Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. How are you? Good. Alhamdulillah. It's a beautiful day outside. I heard some of you say it was a little too hot, and I kind of laughed about it because I lived in Malaysia. That's hot. So it's actually really beautiful here as well. It's my first time in San Diego. I don't usually come in this side of the world, but yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It's a beautiful place, and you're all very blessed to be here, actually. So may Allah continue to bless you. For this session, we're just going to be doing an open Q&A regarding doubts and concerns within the community. MashaAllah. And we're going to keep this as open as possible, and I don't want anyone here to feel as though they can't say anything or ask anything. Okay? Nobody's going to judge you here. This is what we call a safe space, if you want to call it that. And so feel free to be as open, as blunt as possible. Now, you're not going to offend me. You're not going to offend anyone else. Okay? That said, prior to opening the session, there was some feedback in the previous session yesterday, and I just want to address it briefly to clarify some things. And during that discussion, I had talked about the ways to deal with the LGBT ideology, as well as how to deal with individuals or engage with individuals who have that sort of inclination. And there was some misinterpretation regarding my views, to the point that some individuals assume that I somehow support LGBT. Now, most of you would disagree with that assessment if you were there for the vast majority of the lecture, because I was very clear about my stance. I think the confusion was that because I had asked to be merciful to certain individuals, especially within our community, regarding those who have this inclination, that it was a perception that I was supporting the behavior. But I want to be very clear that that is not the case. And I want to issue a correction to those individuals who had that interpretation. I tend not to, but sometimes we do have to be a little forthright here. Okay. For those who had that interpretation, I want to note what the Quran says in regards to the prophetic behavior with respect to those who were even committed to other acts, other sins, and even certain beliefs. Right? So during the prime of the Prophet ﷺ, right, he had particular strategies on how he dealt with people, especially when he was in Mecca. Okay? And he tended to be very merciful with people. And there was a reason for that, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually commends this behavior in the Quran itself. In Surah 3, Ayah 159, it states the following: "So by the mercy from Allah, O Muhammad, you were lenient with them, and if you had been rude in your speech and harsh in your heart, they would have disbanded from you." Right? So pardon them and ask forgiveness for them and consult them in the matter, right? And the example there is that it is not always a good thing to be harsh, regardless of how damaging or bad the sin may appear. Okay? Especially when we want to save our youth from leaving the faith. If we constantly have a harsh attitude towards certain things, or people, actually, okay, we run the risk of losing them, all right? We have to engage with people in different capacities, with different means sometimes, in order to save them, right? So if your whole opinion is that we have to be harsh 24/7 with people, I have to be very clear. Your manhaj is corrupted, okay? Because that is not Quran and Sunnah. If your whole stance is we have to be explicitly harsh all the time, okay, that is not the method of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So I encourage you to please review the seerah, right? Re-examine your own beliefs and try to see if that's just a cultural bias that you have, or if that's really tied to Islam. Because I guarantee that it's not tied to Islam. Okay. So, with that clarification out of the way, let's move into open Q&A. And would we like to start with the sisters, inshallah? If not, we can move directly to the brothers. No, we're done? Okay. Why is everyone shy? Oh, I assume that that was already done by the coordinators. My apologies. So, this open Q&A session is regarding to any doubts that you have about the faith, any concerns that you have about the youth, any concerns you have about for yourself, how to deal with certain issues like atheism, secular liberalism, LGBT issues, etc., etc. If they're too much of a personal nature, we can do personal sessions after the main event, but this is really just an open Q&A. So feel free to ask anything. Yes, sir.
Besides the rituals that we teach our children, how do we bring back the concept of Tawheed, which we take for granted? At least I do, and probably most of us, my parents did that. But I'm sure they probably have questions, and they have a different set of questions in their mind than what we, while growing up, have. So what has your experience been? How do we bring that back into the if these things are raised, how are they handled? What has your experience been?
My,
Like the basic,
yeah, basic beliefs about Islam.
existence of Allah,
Yeah.
Allah being one. Not about prayers and fasting.
One of the greatest attractions in the contemporary period, not just for young Muslims, but even for Christians and Jews, is atheism. That's one of the main routes that they take away from their faith. And the reason being is because, well, it's prolific through society, and atheists tend to be very loud. Well, they've been like this throughout history. But, so they provide the greatest challenge, quote unquote, for a lot of young Muslims today. And I think, obviously, it's also lack of knowledge not only in Tawheed, but also in how to deal with these ideologies. Now, personally, I think that it's not simply like if we teach them Tawheed, this is going to resolve the issue. I don't think that's the case, I'm going to be frank. I think that a lot of young Muslims, and even just young people in general, lack education in things such as critical thinking. They lack education in even what other ideologies actually exist. You know, the first time that they confront, for example, atheism is where? Online. You know, maybe they'll read something on Reddit, or, you know, on Facebook, or, you know, they'll see comments under YouTube videos. They may watch a YouTube video or something. And then this is the first time they're actually engaging with this belief system. Now, if you're living in a country like the United States of America or places in Europe, this is going to happen all the time. And I hear a lot of parents and even imams say, well, stay away from those things. Stay away. Well, no, they can't. They're constantly being confronted with these things, right? And rather than engage, we tend to tell our kids, or the youth in general, to kind of just put their heads in the sand and then just sort of, you know, make dua and just avoid. But that's not easy. Not easy because it's also, these ideas manifest in more than simply statements. They also manifest in behaviors, right? They manifest in the way that we order our society. They manifest in our values, etc. So we have to learn about these ideas. We have to learn about. So I guess my practical advice would be this: is that the masajid need to provide not only courses on tawheed and basic fiqh and tasawwuf and tarbiyah and things like this. They also actually need to provide courses on other ideas and other ideologies. We need to actually have open discussions about these ideas. Because if we truly want to deal with them, we truly want to understand them, and we truly want to be confident in our own faith, we have to know what we're dealing with. We have to know what's out there. We need to know why Islam is superior to this, right? Because, I mean, I'll tell you, I hear this all the time. You know, if we send our kids to university, you know, and they take certain courses or something, then they'll lose their faith. Why? Why? I've never met an ex-Muslim who went to a philosophy class. I'm a professional philosopher. I have a master's degree in philosophy. I didn't lose my faith. There's no reason for that to occur unless, right, they're not being well educated, either at home or in the masjid. It's not that influential. So I think that in order to really to engage with these sort of ideas, in order to really combat a lot of these doubts, I think that we need to start from here in the masjid. We need to actually start introducing these topics to a lot of young people, because they're gonna be introduced regardless if you want them to or not. Like I said, they're online constantly. They're gonna see it. They're gonna have questions, and we need to be prepared to answer these things. So we need to bring in, imams or scholars or even academics who can discuss these issues. Right? What is atheism? What does it mean? Where does it come from? What are the ideas? What are the arguments? How do we deal with these arguments? We have people already in the dawah scene who are doing these things, not just myself. We have people like Hamza Swordsman, right? Mohammed Hijab. Okay, we have Abdullah Andalusi, my cousin. Right? He's actually much better than myself. Right? We have all these resources online, and yet for some reason we're not inviting them. We're not asking for their assistance. Why? I think that's the number one thing we need to do is reform our education process. I agree with you that we need to teach Tawheed. We also need to teach what isn't Tawheed. Right? Because the moment a lot of these young guys are introduced to these concepts and they don't know how to deal with them, you've already lost. You've lost. I think, for me personally, my greatest defense against anti-Islamic polemics is learning about them, where they come from, why those people think the way they do, etc. Like my iman actually goes up when I read something from certain Islamophobes. That sounds crazy, but it's because I'm able to dissect it. I'm able to understand where the flaws are. And because of that, I know Islam is true. It's easy for me to feel confident in my faith because I know that this is ridiculous. But kids who don't know, they can't find what a logical fallacy, they don't know this is a straw man, they don't know what a red herring is, they don't know, contradictions. Easy to be deceived by these things. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not just saying this, to be arrogant, but a lot of this anti-Muslim stuff, anti-Islamic stuff is nonsense. I mean, like, undergraduate philosophy, like, they would fail at a very basic level. I mean, they're idiots. I mean, it's remarkable. And if we actually revived our our tradition of education, because I don't know if many of you know this, but during the golden age of Islam, we didn't just learn about Tawheed. We learned science, we learned philosophy. Ibn Taymiyyah, the reason he could refute so many people is because he tried to understand what everyone else believed. Al-Ghazali as well. The reason they were so impactful is because they actually tried to comprehend these subjects. So I think a proactive stance, a proactive reform towards how we engage with our children and teach them Islam and also about the world needs to happen within the masjid. I know it's easier said than done, but we do have the resources. We just need to come together and invite them, bring them, and to help our youth, inshallah. So, Yusuf. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
You're saying that sometimes from your own experience, when kids are, when you talk to them over, and they say like, oh, it's too late. But at what point do you start to kind of frame it for you? Like at what point do you start talking about stuff they might see later in society? You might watch a movie.
Today they're getting younger and younger, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a funny story first.
How do you frame it?
I'll let you know. But I think it's interesting. So I was just talking to Brother Yasser about this earlier, about Target. Remember the Target story? So there's was it Gay Pride Month was a couple months ago or something, right? So Target started to do this thing where they put like rainbow flags and whatever. And it was funny because I was on Facebook and I started seeing these posts by a lot of brothers and they're like, Astaghfirullah, all these rainbow flags, now they're trying to influence our kids. I'm like, yeah, if you're walking into Target and that's the one thing you're worried about, you got problems. Because there's other pictures in Target that are a lot worse than the rainbow flags, right? And what do you expect when you walk into Target in a secular society? You're going to see pictures of Mufti Mank everywhere? Subhanallah. I mean, you can't, what are you expecting? Right? The point is the priorities are a little messed up here. And our reaction to things can sometimes be extreme to the point where we actually push our kids towards wanting to figure out what those things are, right? Instead of dealing with them confidently, right? We're very sensationalist in the way that we deal with things. It's unfortunate. I think one of the problems is, especially when we engage with the youth, is that instead of taking them seriously and realizing that they have real concerns or real questions, we tend to react in a kind of a harsh or even sometimes very shocking, like, oh, well, how did you figure this out? It's like, you live here. How did you not figure this out, right? So I think first off is the way that we approach things. We need to be more calm, more stoic in our approach with our kids. We need to stop punishing them for being doubtful of things because they live in a society that's just naturally going to occur. Right? And if it hasn't occurred with yourself, then you're not looking around. You're not really seeing what's going on with you, right? So first, frame things. Well, it depends. I mean, like you said, different ages see things a little differently. Right? The older you are, you're going to see things a little bit more complexly. Right? So, again, keep an open avenue of communication, number one. Don't punish or ostracize questions, and speak confidently about Islam. And how you frame it, I suppose, would be that it depends on the issue, but like say atheism, like, if you're 10, 11, 12 years old, your concept of doubting God is going to be much simpler than somebody who's 17 or 18. So you can ask questions in return. Usually I find that like with the youth, like their doubts are easily answered by simply asking them to doubt their doubts. What do I mean by that? So I usually ask a lot of kids who say, well, how do I know God exists? And I say, well, what reason do you have to doubt God's existence? I'll say, well, there's no empirical evidence. I say, why do you need empirical evidence? Well, why not? I say, okay, well, let me ask you some other questions. Do you believe in morality? Yes. Do you believe in human rights or rights? Yes. Do you believe in love? Yes. Do you believe in free will? Do you believe in this and that? And then they'll say yes to everything. I say, do you have any scientific evidence for any of that stuff? No. Then why do you believe in it? Stuff like this shows inconsistencies, shows that certain doubts are actually irrational. Right? I've had some kids try to tease me. They'll be like, well, how do you know this is the real world? I said, how do you know it's not? And what's the point of the question? Right? You're still going to walk around like it is, so why do you even care? Right? You can't find out if it's not real. There's nothing, there's no way to figure that out, so who cares? You're going to wake up in the morning, you're going to go outside, you're going to act like it's still there, so it doesn't matter. Right? What's the point of the question? You have to challenge them as well. Right? Don't just say no or this is the answer. Right? Get them to think about why they're doubting, especially when they're a little younger. Get them training their minds to see when they feel like something is wrong that they start to question if that thing is actually wrong or not. Because one of the biggest problems, I think, with the youth is that when they start to doubt, they go down this path, but they don't first ask themselves, is the doubt rational? Is the doubt rational? Is it a rational thing to even be doubting to begin with, right? What good reason do I have to doubt something, right? Sometimes it's just there. It doesn't really have any substance behind it. Like I hear this too all the time. Who created God? Well, that's an interesting question, but it's kind of nonsensical. It's really quite dumb because what is God? God is the ever-present, is the ever-existing thing. It's never been brought into existence, right? Allah has never been brought into existence. He's eternal, right? So when you say, who created God, you're asking a nonsensical question that goes against the definition of God himself. It doesn't make any sense. And they ask, well, why does there have to be an eternal existing thing? Because if there's something that's always creating something else, you'll never get to the point where something is actually created, because it goes back to infinity, right? There's never a point in time where something comes into existence, because it goes back eternally, it goes back forever. Right? You can't say, oh, this came into existence at 5 p.m., because you'll never get to that point, right? And where is all that energy coming from? So these things, you can keep questioning. It's like, that's nonsensical. Can you imagine things that keep coming into existence forever without having a beginning? Is something you can ask the child? That seems more absurd than something that's always existed. And the fitra will usually kick in after a few questions, and they'll be like, yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. Right? But you find this too. A lot of parents, I feel, not everyone, I'm not trying to condemn everyone, but I'm saying that they don't really engage with discourse with their kids. They just try to tell them what to think and what to do. If you want your kids to feel confident about their faith and to understand why they believe, you have to engage in this discourse. Sometimes you have to play devil's advocate. It's okay. Better you than some random person online that's trying to convince them to become an atheist, right? So that's how I would go about it. Let's even go back to the LGBT thing. You know, if you have a little son or daughter, or even a teenager, and they say, oh, what is that? Explain to them. This is LGBT, this is their sign, this is why we don't believe in it. If they ask questions, just answer calmly. Because the one thing I'll tell you right now that Western kids excel at is rebelling when they see fear, or they see a sense of exaggeration. Okay? There's one thing that in this culture they seem to cultivate a lot, or this idea that being independent from your parents, rebelling against your parents is a virtue, right? So the moment they see something that you're scared of, or that they sense some sort of fear, they'll start to go in that direction. Okay? And I've seen it 100 times. It happens all the time. They'll try to investigate more, like, why is my... They may even look up to them. They say, oh, my father's very religious. Why is he scared of this? You know, let me see if I can get answers from somewhere else. Right? Happens all the time. So, you know, be okay. Be open about these discussions. Because if you exude that confidence, then they'll feel no attraction to it. Right? That's something that I would do personally. So, I hope I answered your question to some degree. Yes? Experience of?
In theory, I have a preference of one way of parenting versus the other.
Okay.
But based on experience, there's one theory where you have to kind of create this bond around your kids and keep them secure from the external influences for as long as you can, so that they're ready to face the world, be full of conscious state. But then the opposite theory, the other way, where parents are like, no, just throw them in the middle of all of this and let them learn how to die.
Okay, those are both two extremes.
Yes.
Um,
What is, in your experience, what has worked? What's the middle?
well, from the most religious youth that I have seen have been those who are raised in a very religious family, who kind of, you know, go out of their way to engage with the community, engage with the masjid, engage with, you know, activism, etc., and at the same time allow them to live in the world, right? But there's a constant sort of discourse of a back and forth as well. There's an openness, right? If you conceal your children from the world, if you try to, you know, isolate them, they're not going to be prepared for it when they get out there, because eventually they're going to go. And the moment they see that the world is not like home, that's it. I mean, it's over, because they have no protection, they have no defense. It's like releasing a bird into the wild that can't fly. You're just signing its death sentence. It's over, right? Same reason, if you just let them go into the world and you don't have a foundation for them to cling to, if you don't have a place for them to seek answers, to seek security from the alien, from the threats, you know, then what? They'll be consumed by it. Likewise, they will not be prepared, right? And they will be lost. There has to be some level of balance. Now, I'm not saying you just give reminders and then you just throw them out there, stuff, right? There has to be a level of engagement with your children beyond, oh, did you get a good A, or good grade in this class? You know, are you doing your homework? You know, are you praying 5 times a day and then you walk away? No, you need to have open discussions. Quite frankly, like say, you know, the best relationship I can think of between parent and child is when the child goes to the parent first to ask about their concerns or about what they experience in the world. Not their friends, not online. No, they go to their mother or father. Like, that is a good relationship. That is a guarantee. At least, you know, of course, everything is up to Allah, but that is the most guarantee you'll get that your kids will be safe from these things. right? When they can go to you, they trust you. And we have a big problem in this community, I think, is that a lot of kids are afraid of their parents for various reasons, right? That's not how it should be, right? We need to be their source, right? We need to be their rock. You know, when they're, especially fathers, like, you know, you do anything to protect your little girl. For those of you who have daughters especially, right? There's a special relationship between fathers and daughters, I think, where, you know, we're overly protective. But, you know, you really want to know what's going on all the time. You really want them to be safe, right? But if your daughter's not telling you anything, if she's scared of you, there's a problem. How are you going to protect your own children if they can't even come to you? Right? If you don't even know what's going on. Like, I've talked to so many parents who are like, I don't know what my daughter's doing. I don't know who she's talking to. Why? Why is she not opening up to you? Why is she not talking? What is the real problem? It's not her talking to those people that's the issue. It's the fact that she's not talking to you that's the issue. So there's something wrong in that relationship to begin with. There's nothing wrong with your daughter per se. There's something wrong between you and her that you need to fix. Because your kids should not be scared. They should fear you out of respect, not out of tyranny. They should fear to disappoint you, not to be punished. Does that make sense? Right. The same way that the Prophet ﷺ was respected. He was not respected because of his punishment. People were scared to disappoint him because of how much they loved him. Right. That's how it should be. If you're having problems, if you feel like your son or daughter is becoming more rebellious or more independent from you, it's because they don't trust you. There is something going on in that relationship that needs to be rectified. And here's something else I'm going to talk about. I know a lot of people are going to stuck for, well, this is a taboo topic, right? But if your daughter likes someone or your son likes one, they should be able to approach their parents and talk about it, right? You want to stop zina in the community? They need to talk to their parents, okay? Not to their friends, not to people online. They need to be able to say, you know, Mom, Dad, I'm interested in, you know, or maybe I'm confused about certain things. Could you communicate with me, help me maybe even to, if they feel like they want to get married eventually, like, they need to know that you're behind them and that you're willing to assist in this time in their life. Because as teenager, thank you so much. He's my lifesaver. MashaAllah. This is my friend. Okay. I have a drug problem, as you can tell, so I apologize in advance. Okay. So, you know, one of the things I hear about all the time is, you know, is like, you know, kids are having such a hard time getting married. You know, I always wonder if maybe parent engagement would assist. And I'm not talking about parent engagement in the sense of, oh, we'll find somebody for you. No, as in, like, they ask their kids what they want. They ask their kids what they're looking for. They ask how they're doing. As they're teenagers, they're going to be going through changes in their life. They're going to start feeling confused. And I'm going to be blunt here as well, because of the environment we live in, they may also be confused about their sexuality. Okay? First thing, if you really want them to be practicing Muslims, if you hear something like that, the first thing you should not do is get upset. I know it's a natural reaction, because it's not something you expect, but if you want to help, if you want them to still come to you, if you want them to still refer to you, in going through this confusion, you need to be calm, and you need to try to figure out how they feel, why they're thinking this way, where they're getting these ideas, right? And you need to still reassure them that you love them regardless. I know it's difficult because, of course, we have to be against certain things, of course, but that doesn't mean we lose love for our children, right? And I can tell you one of the reasons that a lot of young Muslims are moving towards certain movements and stuff is because they've already been shunned before they even do anything. I've seen this sometimes. Some kids will be naive and they'll approach their parents and say, you know, Mom, Dad, I'm feeling there's something wrong, or I feel something's wrong, or I feel like I'm not normal or something. And then what happens is, like, parents will freak out. They get extremely upset. You know, they astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, they just go, you know, it's a madhouse. And then suddenly they feel like they can't trust their parents anymore. They move away. They start going towards the movement even more, right? Because they feel like they're being accepted. They feel like they won't be judged or challenged, right? They won't be ostracized. It happens a lot. This is a reaction to that sort of mentality. But if we're more open as a community while still being solid in our principles, yes, we condemn these things, we will not support these things, but you are still Muslim. And you are still allowed in this masjid, and you're still allowed in this family. That will go a long way to resolving these issues. Wallahi. That is the first step. You want rational answers to LGBT, you want rational answers, I can give them to you, but it won't work on a kid who's already can't trust their parents, can't trust the community. They don't care about rational answers. At that point, they're done. And if you think you're a teenager who's going through that transition, that phase in their life, where they're, I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but the hormones and everything, and just that, going from like, I don't know if you remember, but going from 13 to 18 is like trauma, right? It's like you're a different person every year, right? Like, we need to be more supportive of this. So that would be the first step in resolving these problems. If I rant too much, please stop me. So I go on for a long period of time. I know we have a lot of questions. So anyone have any other questions? Oh, comment, please. John who? Uh, Really? May I ask you a question before you continue? What was the population demographic? Was it white people from the West? Probably. So the problem with studies like that is it didn't take into consideration cultural variations and societal differences. Right? I have to read the study. I'm not trying to necessarily doubt what you're saying, but I need to read the study to actually examine what the specifics are and what demographics it's actually discussing. Because if you look at population variations, like it's dramatic in how couples engage and how they divorce and why, etc. Even selections of mates is dramatically different depending on the culture. So we have to be very cautious with those sort of studies, because if we apply them universally, then we may misinterpret why things are happening the way they are in certain parts of the world. Right? Hmm. Okay. Hmm. Like I said, that study could lend support. I'd have to look at the details, though. I would agree on a general level that communication is essential, obviously. That said, the idea that you need to know the inner workings of the individual in order to keep the marriage going, I would say, is largely debunked by, what is it called, arranged marriages, which tend to have a lower divorce rate than selected marriages, for their own reasons, obviously. Right, so like I said, I would like to look at that report more deeply, and I'm not trying to undermine you necessarily, but I am a little skeptical, so I would like to examine it further if it's okay. So inshallah, if you have the actual reference on hand or on your phone, please share it with me later. Inshallah ta'ala. Sisters? Yes,
How do we address this change of how we raise our daughters as opposed to how we raise our sons?
Hmm.
Because this is a
Well, there is a difference in how we should raise our kids depending on gender. That is true. We have different ways of going about things because there are different responsibilities. And, you know, Muslims, of course, we tend to be more protective of women for a number of reasons, I think valid reasons. And I want to answer that question, but first I also want to kind of clarify that I think there is a problem within our community. They interpret this as value, of who we value more than the other. That tends to happen a lot as well. Unfortunately, with the excuse of protecting our daughters, we tend to, not everyone, but I've seen this quite frequently. There tends to be this behavior where brothers are given a lot more leeway if they commit a sin versus if a sister does. And brothers are given a lot more opportunities, a lot more encouragement to certain things. They're not. This is actually mental confidence and the religious and psychological well-being of a lot of our sisters. Right. Again, before going, I want to comment that, but with respecting the roles of men and women in traditional Islamic society, if we go back through our tradition and we go to history, like even during the Golden Age, men and women, despite having their various different roles, they also were somewhat equal in the way that they participate in society, in education as well. Women, actually, I would even say that women in traditional Islamic societies were far more educated than they are today in many modern Muslim societies, to be quite frank. In fact, some of the greatest librarians during the Golden Age were women. Some of the women who opened up some of the people who opened up universities were women. Many of the patrons of universities were women. Okay, many of the greatest teachers were women. Women played a large part in Islamic education in the past. A huge part in Islamic. I mean, Al-Andalus had the second largest library in existence in the Muslim world, next to the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, and it was run by a woman. She was the gateway to knowledge in Al-Andalus, right? Lubna of Cordoba, that was her name, Lubna of Cordoba. She was, the caliph would actually direct her to set up curriculum as well as to find resources for scholars to develop their lessons. So she was actually that important. She actually managed 150,000 books at a time, preserved them, took care of them, managed the staff. Without her, there would have been no education in Al-Andalus, right? So women played a larger part in that respect. And they were actually treated with a great deal more respect as well. I mean, today we have a lot of Islamic schools, and a lot of women are teachers, but they don't get paid anything, and nobody cares that they exist. That's the general sentiment. They're easily replaced. You know, we have non-Muslim teachers who get paid twice as much as our Islamic teachers. Astaghfirullah. They get benefits and everything. But here, you know, a sister dedicates her time to not only teaching her kids, but also teaching your children, and we can't even raise enough money to pay her a decent salary. Astaghfirullah. It's a shame happening all across the Muslim world. This is not appropriate. So with regard to your question now, how do we go about doing this? I think that responsibilities and need to be properly allocated between the genders. Now, I don't believe that brothers should be allowed just to go and do whatever they want. I think that's inappropriate. I think if you're going to give a curfew to your daughter, you need to give the same to your son, right? You need to show that there's an equal level of concern and value between them. I think that if your daughter wants to learn, she should be allowed to learn, of course, within halal means, right? But you need to do everything within your power to give her a proper education, likewise with a boy. I hear this a lot too. They say, well, we can't send our daughters to university because of free mixing, but it's okay if we send the brothers because they need a job. So it's okay for them to possibly commit zina because they'll get a decent salary, but the sisters, no, that's wrong. That's ridiculous, right? I mean, if you're really concerned about free mixing, that's your biggest concern. Study remotely. Don't send one off and then keep the other one at home. You're sending mixed messages. Our kids aren't dumb. You're going to figure out there's a problem here. Well, why is it more probable for me to commit zina, but not my brother? He can sacrifice his deen to become a doctor, but I can't? I mean, you're playing with the religion in their minds. That's what you're doing, right? You have concerns for modesty, same concern you share with the sons as they are with the daughters, right? And in fact, from personal experience, from seeing Muslims in university, that the most religious, the most organized, the most responsible, especially for the MSAs, tend to be the sisters. No offense to the brothers. But I've had to deal with a lot more apostasy issues with brothers than sisters. And in fact, I've seen a lot of secular sisters become Muslim, more practicing than I have seen with brothers in the university setting. Now, I don't know the reasons for that specifically. I've seen it. So these concerns, like, if we send our daughters to university, they'll become apostates. Your sons should be the ones you're concerned about more. Because statistically speaking, they're more likely to apostate. Not the sisters. Maybe there's some other family dynamics within that context that makes that happen. But generally speaking, I think that while we should admit to the differences between men and women and treat them accordingly, we also need to make sure that we're being balanced and that we're showing equal value to both sides. Right, because they are both equally valid, right? And going back to the concept of education again, I want to be very clear. When you say, for example, and I've heard this excuse many times, when you say, oh, well, the brothers need to go to university because they have to raise their families, they need money, okay? This is an obligation upon them to maintain and protect their family members. Yes, you're correct. But who's going to be teaching the kids at home when they're off to work, if you want to live in that sort of that traditional structure, right? Who's going to be teaching the kids? Who's going to be teaching them about the world? Helping them with their homework. If your wife's not educated, or if their sister's not educated, that's not going to be easy, right? So education is important for both parties. I don't know if I actually answered your question. Did I answer your question to some degree? Do you want to emphasize it again? So. Oh, you're equal. Islam does not teach, this is going to be a controversial statement, Islam does not teach unlimited, like some equality, okay? There are differences between men and women, all right? That is the bottom line. That's a biological fact. If you want to start talking about all these new movements with non-binary and all this other stuff, we can do that. Biological fact. Physically, even mentally in some respects, not in terms of intelligence, but in the way that we perceive things. Women perceive things very differently than men in many respects. Even how they view children is somewhat different, right? So there are differences. I mean, if there weren't differences, we wouldn't exist. What would be the point of having two different sexes, two different genders, if there was no differences at all, right? We'd all be asexual. Like, there would be no point, right? I mean, it's not just the type of organs we have that makes us different, right? There are very significant differences that complement each other, okay? At a very deep level, right? So when you hear this propaganda out there, well, brothers and sisters are equal on all levels, it's like, no, that's nonsensical, because if that was the case, we wouldn't value each other at all. There would be no point even being together if there was no complementary differences. Right? And of course, the more superficial example that's brought into this picture is physicality. I don't know if you've heard or you've seen some of the news stories, but you see some of these events, for all women events, where one person identifies as a woman and tends to win all the competitions for some strange reason that nobody can figure out, having to do with testosterone, okay? Which, It's not exactly, I guess, biologically fair if you want to say that, but it's true. There is a significant difference. You can't just say, well, I'm a woman now, so it counts. No, you have male traits that make you significantly different. It's also why throughout history men have been largely expendable. What does that mean? Why do you think men have usually fought wars? Because we're not as valued as much in terms of life. That's why they say protect the women and children first, because you're the future. Men, if you die, you just get another guy, and you're okay. You know what I mean? Men have largely throughout history, human civilization, have sacrificed themselves for women and children. Why? Because they're sexist? No, because they realize that they're replaceable. Most women and children are not, right? You carry life, right? Men only assist partially in that, and then they walk away. You know, they die, you can just get another one, right? That's why also this also pertains to marriage. That's why also Islamically you can actually marry more than one, because men tended to die a lot. So somebody needed to take care of all these women who happen to no longer have husbands. Okay, there's a lot of widows and divorcees during that time. And so it was allowed to marry more than one because, well, men died a lot more. And even today, men die a lot more. It's just statistically the case. Men live less long than women do. So there's even biological evidence behind that. So that's my lengthy answer. How to deal with it would be to simply continue to teach Islamic values, and at the same time, just make sure that you're not devaluing one over the other, right? Make sure that they respect their differences. They don't consider it a detriment or a handicap, because it's not. Sisters, you're very special in every single way, okay? I mean, that's just, it's undeniable. A man's duty in Islam is to be a maintainer and protector of women. Now imagine that you're thinking, well, that's so sexist. You know, that's like, oh, that means he's above. No, it's to be like, basically, that's his purpose in life, is to take care of you. Do you understand how like significant? It's not you taking care of him. That's not your purpose in life, right? It's him taking care of you. That's how special you are, that the other half of the human population has been ordered that their purpose is for your existence. That's how significant you are in the deen. A lot of women, they tend to read those passages and they think of it in a very different way, but you have to think of it in this way, okay? Allah is ordering males. We are born with this purpose in life, to take care of you. Nobody says that's sexist. Why? And I'm not complaining. Actually, I'm very proud of that. And every other male in here should be as well. That you're willing to lay down your life to take care of our sisters. That's how valuable they are. You know, if I jump in front of a bus to, you know, save my wife and daughter, I'm not doing it because, oh, this is fun. I'm doing it because I don't value myself. I value you. I value sister. That's part of my fitrah. It's to value the women above my own life. Find a husband who actually believes in that, and you found a good man. Right? If you find a husband that says, well, we're both equal, he's probably not going to do crap for you. He's weak. It's being frank, so. Any other questions? Is that too long of an answer? Everyone's done. Do's and don'ts. Because you have to explain things to kids, especially those who are very inquisitive, right? If you tell a kid, especially lived in this culture where everything is considered to be a democracy, even in terms of how we think and how we believe, because you hear that all the time. Everyone has to have an opinion now, right? This is primarily a Western phenomenon where everyone thinks they're an expert. You know, they read something on Wikipedia for 5 minutes and then suddenly they think they know more than doctors do. This happens all the time. But generally speaking, I mean, if you really want to engage, especially with youth who grow up in this culture, you have to be more than just do's and don'ts. You're correct. You have to be more about engaging with them as in trying to get them to understand why that's the case. And it can be frustrating at times, especially as a parent, if you have all these burdens and you have all these responsibilities you have to do, right? You can't just always sit there and sit down and, okay, explain everything to them. Sometimes you have to be like, okay, no, right? And just, that's it. Get to the point, move on. But when you have time, try to be conscientious. Try to teach your children why we don't do these things, not simply, well, Islam says don't. Well, explain a little bit further than that, right? To get them to start appreciating Islam. Like, for example, why don't you go back to the whole situation with daughters? Like, why don't you let them wear whatever they want, right? You have some very good reasons as to why. Explain to them without insulting them, without, making them feel lower. Just say, because we want to protect you from the gazes of men. You're more valuable than that. You don't need to be treated like an object. I want to make sure that you're always respected. That's the reason why, and I love you. That's a simple answer. It's a good answer, right? And that's what Islam teaches me to do. So please, out of respect for me and your religion and your values, wear your hijab, please. That's all you have to do. Right? But if you just say, don't wear it, don't question me. What value is that in that answer, right? So, somebody sent you. Ooh, mashallah. Christmas. Uh-huh. There are certain holidays that we, yeah. Giving candies in and of itself is not haram. Giving candies within a specific context is haram. Same way with everything. Doing something per se is never haram unless it's within a specific context. So for example, before we go into the holidays, which are more explicit, let me give you a funny example. Who here covers their mouth when they yawn? Everyone? It's a respectful thing to do, right? You know it has a pagan origin? Hindus used to do it because they didn't want their soul leaving their bodies or spirits coming inside of them. That's how it originated. That's where it started. But now we do it because it's rude to show you. Well, we do it for a very different reason. We don't even recognize that there's kufr that it came from, right? That it came from a kufr origin. We don't recognize that, and it no longer has that meaning behind it. So it's benign. It doesn't affect us. But if we know the pagan origin, we know that it's still significant within the practice itself, then purposely doing it is haram. So for example, if I know that participating in a certain festivity, knowing the meanings and the context behind it, is engaging with these sort of pagan beliefs and practices, then that's haram. That's explicit. That's kufr. So, I mean, a general rule, I would say specifically, you do not practice things like Christmas and Halloween and things like that, right? Because it's well known even by secular individuals that these still have pagan elements within them. That said, probably the more concerning thing when it comes to the youth is because these are so widely accepted practices in society, they're going to ask you, why can't we have fun? Why can't we do things, right? And that's where I would tell you is that don't reserve special times with your family for those holidays. If you want your kids not to miss these things, you need to do other things with them that they don't feel the need to do these things. I think, and I'm not saying this is for all families, but I've noticed that usually kids will be upset about these sort of activities not being able to participate is because their parents aren't already engaging with them in ways where they, wouldn't feel the need to do so. Maybe they have distant parents, or they feel that, or maybe oftentimes they're allowed to hang out with their friends more, and there's not much engagement in the family, right? Now, I'm not saying this is all situations. Maybe it's different for everyone, but that's what I usually say. So yeah, it's create an environment in your family where they don't feel the need to do, they don't feel like they have to, or that they're going to be left out of something, right? Because what is the appeal of these things? That they're just popular within society. That's it. It's the only real appeal. That they feel left out. It's not like, oh, they really want to have a Christmas tree. Like they like the Christmas tree or something. They just like having it. That's not the reason. So. Yes. What is?
People are struggling because we can't find halal turkey except during Thanksgiving.
Hello, turkey.
Together because of we have
If
halal turkey.
if you're getting together because you just want to do something, that's fine, as long as you're not celebrating the holiday specifically. Like if you're not doing it for that purpose, right? Like I've seen families just go out for dinner on holidays without even celebrating the holiday. They just go out to dinners to have dinner. It's an excuse to go outside and to be together, but they don't actually like engage with the practices. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. In Malaysia, there are not a lot of Christians, but there are enough Christians where they do celebrate Christmas, and that's actually an excuse for the Malay Muslims to go out and do their own thing. So they tend to go to movies or something, or they just do whatever they want. And they don't engage with the practice. Right, so yeah, you can celebrate anything. You can get family night anytime. You don't have to, and you can use like a national holiday as an excuse without practicing anything within it. Right, I think that's perfectly fine as well. I mean, halal turkey. I've actually had halal turkey quite a number of times because my parents aren't Muslim, so they celebrate Thanksgiving, and I don't celebrate it, but I want to eat that day. So, and they want me to come over with the family and stuff. So we do, and we have the halal turkey, and then we leave. But we don't engage in anything else. We just have dinner, and I go. You know what I mean? Even in Christmas, my parents have a Christmas tree. I come over during Christmas, and I say hi. And I say, "How are you doing?" And everything good. And I'm respectful and everything. But we don't engage in the practices, and then we leave. And they understand that. They understand why. So it's. I don't think it's difficult. It's just you have to, from an early age, you just have to kind of make it the norm for your kids. Like we don't engage with this stuff. Same thing. Do you ask the same question when it's like Jewish holidays? No, because you rarely see them, right? or Hindu holidays. Some of you do actually. In the Desi community, you actually have this issue you have to engage with. Do we go to Diwali festivals and stuff like that? That's a problem. But there are many religious holidays in this country that most Muslims don't even concern themselves with. So what's the difference between Christmas and Halloween? Just because they're more popular, it's no difference. Right? You can still live your life and have a good time. Right? So that's what I would do. Give them an excuse not to care. Right? So you? Yep.
You made a comment about Yalman, right? Yalman. I mean, just wanted to make sure, because I teach my kids that we actually have.
No, it has a pagan origin. Yeah.
So obviously the origin even from pagans, probably it was done.
It could have been done by somebody before that. It could have been done. But I'm saying that if you really want to be like,
Yeah, I just don't want kids
because
to do that and like,
oh no, because there are people who nitpick to such an extent where it's like we can't do this, we can't do that. Sometimes a lot of the practices that we engage in, even normal etiquettes, they had a religious significance hundreds and hundreds of years ago that it's completely faded away. Like nobody even thinks of gods or pagan anywhere they do it, And that's fine because the intention is not there to perform kufr acts and nobody even knows that they are, right? So it's like, those are more benign, but when it comes to like festivities with obvious pagan elements, even that the secular individuals know, even the Christians know. This is the weird thing about it. Christians, they celebrate something with pagan elements in it. And they know that there's pagan elements in it. Like there's Christmas trees and stuff like this, and it's strange. Even they regard Jesus' birthday being on or resurrection and birthday being on pagan holidays. They know these things, and yet they still celebrate them. Right? It's ludicrous. Um, so, yeah. Sisters have any more questions? No? Anyone in the back? You can talk about anything that's on your mind. We've talked about some issues regarding rituals and practices, LGBT. We can talk about atheism, we can talk about secular liberalism. Yes? Is that? Very haram. Is LGBTQ haram? So I'm going to give you the direct answers, okay? Identifying with a specific sentiment or sexuality, like saying I'm attracted to this, is not in and of itself haram. The actions performed as a result of that are haram. So for example, if one identifies as homosexual, we cannot say that that's haram unless they say that they are engaging in sodomy. Okay, so the act itself of intercourse is what we consider to be sinful. It's not the sentiment or the feeling. No different than if a heterosexual person, right, said that they felt the desire to commit zina. That is not in and of itself haram. It's only if they commit zina that it's haram. Okay. As for identifying as a type of gender or something that is like non-binary or something of that sort, that's a little bit more difficult to narrow down. I would say that's erroneous, but it's hard to say that that sentiment is haram because it's not an action, it's not an action of sin. It's not liwat. It's not something that the scholars would lash you for, right, for committing. So if that's your only question regarding if it's halal or haram, that's the answer I can give you. But if you're asking further than that, like how do we treat people like that? How do we engage with people like that? How do we treat them as Muslims? I can go further. Is that what you want me to do, or? Okay, because that is the. Okay, that is the answer. So the activity of engaging in sexual intercourse with the same sex is haram. In the same way that if a heterosexual person has sex with an unmarried, that's haram. Okay, that's zina. All right.
Can you take it to the next level? I mean, nowadays, like in Europe and in the United States also, they're letting two men get married, two women.
Well, we don't count that.
No, we don't count that. How do you explain that? If somebody comes to you and says that, okay, they're having the act after getting married legally in the United States, how would you explain?
In the Islamic perspective, yeah, in the Islamic perspective, no such marriage exist. It just doesn't.
Why?
Because marriage is not defined that way in the Islamic tradition. Marriage has been specifically made as an institution for men and women, and to foster families, to create families. Okay, it's just not possible. It's just not part of the. It's like a contradiction in terms. It's nonsensical according to our tradition. Right? I'm not saying that as an insult. It just doesn't make any. There's no meaning. Right? It's like saying married bachelor. That's. Right? Oh, they can adopt and they can do this. Okay, who are they adopting? Where did the adoptee come from? So, I mean, yeah, no. If you want me to give sort of almost a philosophical answer as to why I think that these sort of relationships aren't normative to human society or even how we are designed as people, is that no civilization can function or even be produced as a result of these unions. I mean, that's what is the point of procreation, to have families, but then to continue the species. If you want to take an evolutionary route here, as many people will do, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, then if we're talking about survival of the fittest, if we're talking about passing your genes, the last thing you should be is gay, because that doesn't work, right? Right? I mean, you don't get a functioning society from that. You don't pass your genes from getting married to same sex. It's not conceivable. It's not possible. So if they want to come up with these sort of convoluted explanations, well, we can do this and that. Well, the only reason you can do this or that is because there are heterosexual couples having those children to begin with, right? And there are heterosexual couples still advancing the species. If that's the sort of level you want to argue in terms of, at the material level, the physical level, then you've already shot yourself in the foot. I make the same argument about atheists all the time, actually. Similar argument. So a lot of people tell me, well, why is atheism a bad position to take? And I say, because no, atheism has never created civilizations. Atheists have never run a civilization for all of human history. It's a useless belief. It's a useless position to have. Theists have been running the world since day one. If they were truly more intelligent, if it truly was evolutionarily advantageous to reject God, then why is it that they've never done anything and that we're still in power, right? And that we're still running the world. The world functions because of our belief in the transcendent. At no point in human history has an atheist civilization ever come into existence that's lasted long enough for us to even consider. In fact, the best examples that have existed recently was in the 20th century, with Stalin, Pol Pot, and others who slaughtered their own populations and then eventually descended into madness. I'm not saying that's indicative of every atheist or that's a mentality, but what I am trying to say is that they have no good examples to refer to, Atheism? Nowadays it is actually. Because a philosopher by the name of Antony Flew conflated the definitions. So he demarcated between what we call weak atheism and strong atheism. My apologies for complexity of this discussion. Just give me a brief moment. And what he said was that weak atheism means one who lacks belief in God, and then a strong atheist is one who disbelieves in God, meaning that they believe God does not exist. So contemporary atheists tend to take the former position, the weak atheist position. They say they lack belief in God because there's not sufficient evidence. So they take a more epistemological route instead of an ontological one. So, okay. Yes?
So I had a question about intention. So kind of going back to LGBTQ, where you could relate it to you know how sometimes when you feel angry,
Okay.
or you feel sad, and how you kind of, I've heard that having the thoughts are not haram, but engaging in the thoughts and putting action into those thoughts. But then I heard this thing the other day, and it was like, okay, yes, you're mad and you're angry and you're feeling those thoughts inside, but you're not acting upon them. That's not haram to have those thoughts. But it's also what could be considered a sin is engaging those thoughts in your head.
No, that's not. No.
So
That's-
talking to yourself about it and feeding yourself.
No. In fact, sometimes the best defense against it is internal discourse. Because if you never question, how are you going to figure out why you're feeling that way to begin with?
Oh, no. My question is so basically if I was mad at
Oh, God.
let's say I'm mad at her and I'm not acting upon it, so I'm not treating her differently, but in my head I'm gathering up these things and I just keep feeding myself into that, keep thinking about why do I not like her?
It's self-damaging to your spirit. It's self-damaging to your psychology. But it wouldn't necessarily be haram. Haram is a legal category.
But it's feeding into those thoughts is sin.
No. What do you mean, act? It's not healthy. But you're not. I wouldn't. When you say haram, it's like you're committing an action that is condemnable and can lead you to be punished or even sent to hell. This is having your nafs bothering you, right? Or you're having a fleeting sense of arrogance, right? Let's say you start feeling arrogant. We discussed this last night, actually. You're feeling a sense of arrogance, And yet, in the moment, you control yourself. Have you committed a sin?
No.
Even though you've had those feelings?
No.
No. Because the action was contrary. You controlled yourself. You were able to finally push back and say, no, I'm not going to allow my nafs to take control of me. Your nafs will always be there bothering you. That's the test that you have as a Muslim. Alhamdulillah that you have those tests, because if you didn't, then I would question your, your faith. Because then shaitan has you. Because shaitan doesn't whisper to people he already has. So, yes. Huh? Piercing? Septum piercing. So, beautifying yourself is fine. So, sisters, you get certain piercings. And how would I put this? You are allowed to beautify yourself to an extent, okay? As long as it's not what we call well, of course it's harmful, but I'm trying to figure out the Arabic term. I've lost it from my mind. If you're not drawing attention to yourself, that's the purpose of hijab, is also not to draw attention to yourself unwarrantedly, right? And the same concept actually applies to men as well. So even though men don't don the headscarf or any sort of certain clothing, they're not actually allowed to present themselves in such a way that people are drawn in a sort of a lustful manner, right? Okay, so men have to be very cautious about this, just as much as sisters. But if you're wearing a piercing that is very obvious and that kind of draws attention to you in sort of a more than normal manner, then that can be considered sinful, yes. That said, if you're like in the presence of other sisters or with your husband, or if it's not really an issue and the piercing exists and they see it and it's not really, it's not an issue. But if you're seeing a lot of men starting to notice, that's a problem. Right, so just being frank, right? So, excuse me? Tattoos are haram. No, henna tattoos or tattoos? Okay, no, tattoos are haram because you cannot violate the body in that sense. You cannot. What is it? That's considered a violation of what Allah has given you, in that you are actually mutilating the skin. Okay. You're changing it permanently, as in it's actually a violation of your body. Okay, this is unacceptable. Whereas a piercing is not usually regarded as that way. It's very insignificant in comparison, right? It's not also a permanent feature. One can also heal the wound of a piercing. I actually had 2 piercings when I was a non-Muslim. I don't know if you can notice. I do have holes in my ears. Okay. So, I mean, these things can heal themselves, right? But with a tattoo, even with removal, there's scarring, etc. So, I mean, it's not acceptable. That said, we have to be very cautious. There are a lot of reverts who have tattoos, and some brothers and sisters tend to judge them. They like, astaghfirullah, they have tattoos. Well, you don't, they might have had that before they reverted. Relax,
Tattoos, I'm just thinking about it. I would assume that tattoos were probably common among Africans even at the time of Prophet Muhammad.
So, yeah.
And later at the time, Abu Hanifa or Malik or Imam Shafi, maybe based on their experience of the region where they lived in, they declared that as haram. I'm not sure, because Africans who became Muslims, it was part of their culture.
I understand where you're coming from. Out of fear of something which I will say, I don't wish to comment on their intentions. But traditionally speaking, when we talk about Imam Malik, Abu Hanifa, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Imam Shafi'i, we, even though they had flaws, we do regard the tradition as being sound in accordance with Quran and Sunnah. So I feel uncomfortable remarking about why they would have done so. I understand it's, I mean, we can look at it from an academic perspective if you wish.
No, the reason I was asking that last Friday, we had another topic on how Islam doesn't impact culture as non-culture.
Yes.
Languages, an Islamic thing.
Yeah, I mean,
I was going to ask the question to Jamal Iman was here last
hmm.
week. I think he didn't have time.
Out of fear, and also giving you the wrong answer, I'm going to say I don't know. I'm sorry. I apologize. We'll say just for entertainment's sake, just for interest, that coffee. Yeah. I will say that one thing that was somewhat culturally influenced at one point in time was that coffee was actually regarded as haram at first. But no, as you can tell, it no longer is. But yeah, probably because they didn't understand the health benefits. But the difference. I think tattoos have largely always been regarded as haram since the beginning of our tradition, and as such, they have roots in the Quran and Sunnah, at least from the perspective of traditional scholars. So that I don't wish to comment any further on that, if you don't mind. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we? Did I do something? Oh, okay. Sorry. Food is here. The best part of the event.